Thank you, Glenn, for hosting and sharing the meeting and for asking me to come and share my experience with you. And Carol, thank you as always. She is the one that keeps me in the loop, it would seem. My name is Jamie Filippelli, and I am an alcoholic. Excuse me. I have a sobriety date. It's January 14th of 2001. I have a sponsor who knows that he is my sponsor up to and including today. And that's really important for me as an alcoholic. I've seen a lot of sly moves, people having sponsors in name. And luckily for me, that has not needed to be my experience in sobriety. I'm going to read this little passage from our big book. It's one of my favorites. This is just to kind of get me centered and let God know that I am fully aware that I'm incapable of helping his kids. But when I ask him to open my heart and allow me to be a channel, I know that he will. He will also give me the willingness to do that. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. That's from page 164 in A Vision for You in our big book, or my beat up big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, because that's where I live. It really is. So let me tell you a little bit about what it was like. Again, my name's Jamie Filippelli, and I am an alcoholic. I am a low bottom, deep, dirty drunk, and that's how I got to you guys. I got to you guys full of guilt and shame and disgust with myself, completely incapable of drawing a sober breath for I can't tell you how long before I got sober. But I come from a family that loved me with every fiber of their being. I'm the youngest of what was 8 kids. One of my brothers hung himself in the room in a boarding house because of this disease, and he couldn't find his way to us. And so that family loved me. Now, if in the actual time of my youth, I wouldn't have told you that. I'd have told you that I didn't get anything because everybody screwed everything up before me. Wasn't allowed to do anything because my brothers and sisters, wah, 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 wah. Today I hear that like Charlie Brown's teacher. My mom was a Catholic woman. My mom and dad were separated for the first 19 years of my life. My mother was a devout Catholic woman, and I saw what she did. And I saw what she got from this power that it took me getting to Alcoholics Anonymous to have a relationship with. She was very involved in the church. My father was the sexton of our church. My mom went to prayer meetings. She prophesied. She spoke in tongues. All of that stuff freaked me out, which probably made it even easier for me to live my life separately from God. But I also saw the peace that she got. And I'm here to tell you, I'm not a recovering Catholic. I believe that they gave me what they thought would work for me. And it worked for my family. It just didn't, I couldn't find it there. I saw it though, I've been a seeker my entire life. And so I saw it in the Catholic Church, one of many places that I saw to find whatever was wrong with me. Because in this family of 8 kids, loving, beautiful family of 8 kids, I didn't belong. I didn't fit there. Something was wrong. I was different. I couldn't identify that, but something was up. And so I sought everything to try and find out what was wrong with me. We were at a prayer meeting with my mother one time, and they had invited this gentleman in to lay his hands on the congregation that chose to come to this prayer meeting. And so we're standing at the altar in this half circle, and I'm watching these people. And this guy's laying hands on them and saying whatever it was that he said. And they're speaking in tongues, and they're prophesying, and they're falling down. And so in my head, that's what I need to do. Maybe that's what I need to do to find this thing. So he gets to me and he lays his hands on my head, and I fall down on the floor. And I had no white light experience in that thing. It's just one of the examples of the things that I tried to find out what was wrong with me. And again, my family was fantastic. We used to go and see my grandmother, and my grandmother would say, "Anne, I hate when you bring your kids here to visit me because they don't come to visit me, they come to visit each other." So what I'm getting at is that there was nothing wrong with my family. There was nothing wrong with my childhood. I'm not a product of childhood abuse, any of those things. I'm alcoholic. I was alcoholic long before I put a drink into my system. What happened was that I found the drink. And I'm a blackout drinker. I will tell you that a lot of my life is just gone. I don't remember a lot of my childhood. I don't remember a lot of my teenage years. I believe that God has removed those things for some reason, and I'm not trying to find out the reason. I'm a blackout drinker. I believe that I started drinking at about 12, and I started blacking out at the age of about 16 years old. And as far as I know, I mean, it seems normal with the people that I hang around with in AA, but that doesn't seem normal to me. And that's not what my brothers and sisters or my family or any of my friends were experiencing. That was my experience. And so I found this magic stuff. And the first time that I drank, I don't know that I got drunk, but what I know is that it made me able to just go and be comfortable in my skin. I remember periods in my drinking where I didn't even need to put the drink in. When I knew that it was coming, I knew everything was going to be okay. So I pursued this stuff because it worked. And I pursued it immediately, like it was the center of my life. And I will tell you that alcohol didn't steal anything from me. It didn't take anything away from me. I voluntarily gave that everything that I needed to give it. Gave everything away. Gave away my heart. I gave away my soul. I gave away my body. I gave away my family. I gave away my friends to follow this thing that made it okay for me to be here on this planet. And all the while I'm telling myself lies. My brothers and sisters used to say to me, "Jamie, you've got a lot of potential. You just don't seem to be doing anything with it." I was very proud of myself. I worked as a bartender and a server. The reason that I got into that was because it was what I could do. I had cash in my pocket all the time. And they had this genius thing where you worked a shift and you got a shift drink, which I thought was amazing. What that did was that just started off the evening's events. And I never have been fired from a job. I think what happened, now that I have some clarity in my sobriety, is that I always saw the hammer coming because it looked the same to me every time. I knew when I had been late that one last time, or whatever it was that I was messing up in my life. And so I would just quit and run because I knew that it was coming. I got sober and I used to brag about the fact that I'd never been fired in my life. But what I will do is I'll do whatever I need to get alcohol. And the way that I drink is I was working at a restaurant in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I was the supervisor, catering supervisor. I'm really good. I have a lot of really great skills, and I always get into positions that I can't handle, and so I'm the catering supervisor at this restaurant. And this is how alcoholic Jamie drinks. So I rented out the balcony of this restaurant, and I invited a bunch of people to come to this party. And in order for me to be the center of that party, I thought it would be a good idea for me to have 7 martinis before anybody got there. And what happens is, I'm having 1 martini and it goes down really easily, and, up to the 7th martini, and then I disappear. And I don't mean that I leave the building. I mean that I disappear. What I remember is that one person showed up, and then I was in and out of a blackout. And then I remember the rest of that night in bits and pieces, going in and out of blackouts. I don't remember. I know that I've made amends to that restaurant since, but I didn't remember whether or not I had paid my bill, whether I had tipped my coworkers. I don't remember anything. I remember very little about that evening. And that's the way that Jamie Filippelli drinks. I have a family that tried to be there with me till the very end, because that's what they did. I believe that my family had these principles in their lives from the beginning, and they were offered to me as well. I just couldn't see them because I had this spiritual malady that needed booze to fix it. And so, unfortunately for me, my best friend, which is alcohol, and I've done everything. I've done everything that gets me outside of me. I don't talk about those things here because I am an alcoholic and I am a purist for AA. But there are things that work a lot quicker for me, and I was getting involved in those things. There was a period of my life where I was questioning why I was the way that I was, because I had want to stop being the man that I was for I can't tell you how long. And I loved my mom. She was the most beautiful person on the planet. I lived, I believe it was 8 doors away from my mother and father after they had gotten back together in this beat up little apartment. And they didn't know I lived there. And what I would do is I would go out and I would watch them down the street, and I would watch them bring home their groceries, and I would watch them have a life. And I wanted to go and be a part of that life. But at this point, I was unable to look them in the eye anymore because I was so full of guilt for the man that I was becoming. For some reason, after that, my mother had Alzheimer's, and she was beginning to descend into the pits of Alzheimer's, and she wanted her son, Jamie, to take care of her. We were the same person, and she loved me with every fiber of my being, just like the rest of my family who stuck with me to the bitter end. And so I would take care of her, or at least in my version of taking care of her. And what that looked like for me was that we lived together, and I was supposed to be there to make sure that she was fed and that she was taken care of. And the way that looks to me is that she is taking a bunch of money out of her bank account and she's hiding it around our house. And I'm finding it, and I'm taking that money and I'm leaving. And I'm leaving for 2 days and 3 days and 2 weeks at a time. And I'm going to places where I can get what I need. And I don't even know, I'm not even cognizant at that moment of the fact that she's at my house and I'm her caretaker. And what happens is I have a really great friend who on September 5th will be sober for 2 years. His name's Billy. He was my ride or die in my active alcoholism because he was just like me. And I go to these places, and what happens is I hear a knock on the door downstairs. And I hear this, "Where is he? I know he's in there. Get him out here." And so what happens is, and I see this in the morning when I'm getting ready to share my experience, God gives me these glimpses of who I was before I came to you guys. And so I walk to the top of the steps in this building and I look at my feet because I can't look anybody in the eye anymore. And I walk downstairs and he yanks me by my arm and he says, "What are you doing? Your family has been calling me for 10 days. What are you doing? They're telling me that your mother's at home and they don't know when she ate last and she's dirty." And I don't know how to answer that question because that's not the man that I ever intended to become, but that's who I've become because of my alcoholism. And so I'm sorry, excuse me, I got a little choked up. And so I go home and I make another attempt, and I'm making excuses to my family, and I'm hiding in the bathroom of my family's home for 3 days at a time. And they allow me to continue until I'm sitting in a drive-through teller with a check in my hand that doesn't belong to me. It doesn't have my name on it. And I'm looking through the glass window, and they're just getting ready to give me the cash. And I see my 2 sisters who were also taking care of my mother from their homes. I see them flying into the bank, and they see me in the drive-through through the window, and I make it out of there just in time. And I feel like I've gotten away with something again. And what happens as a result of that is that they say to me, my family who loved me with every fiber of their being, they wanted to hang out with me every day till the end. They say something to me just like this: "We need you to go away. We need you to leave our family alone and don't ever come back here again. And if you do, we will do what we need to, and that looks like you going to prison. Because, see, I'm breaking all kinds of laws. I'm not taking care of the things that I committed to take care of. I'm doing what I need to do, and what I need to do is to fill myself up with this thing that I think is my best friend. And what happens is it turns on me, and it starts to kill me. And I have these questions in my head, like, because I see other people in the world like having a life and going to college and graduating high school and having careers, and I couldn't make any of those things happen. I couldn't be a brother, I couldn't be a son, I couldn't be a caretaker. And so my family tells me that I can never come back, and I resent them. I think that they're wrong and they're rude and they're hateful. Because, see, I can't see what I'm doing to people until I come to you guys and you give me some clarity. And so January 13th of 2001 was a day like every other day that I had known for, again, I can't tell you how long. I really have no idea before January 14th of 2001 when I had drawn a sober breath, because I had to keep something in my system to just allow me to be on this planet with the rest of you people. So January 13th of 2001 was a day like every other day in my life. I had woken up again, angry because it didn't work again. I woke up again to put all this stuff into my system last night. I was absolutely sure that I wasn't going to wake up again today. But see, I don't get to choose when I get sober or how long I stay drunk. But what I believe is that God, when he touches me by my grace, I'm allowed to do whatever it is that he wants me to do. And so January 13th of 2001, it was like I was floating over the room of another apartment that I hadn't paid the rent on, that I was living in, that was covered in bottles and cans and just filthy and disgusting. I used to do this thing where I would bring home money and I would throw change behind the bookshelves and behind the couches so that that little bit of change could get some ramen noodles and some Kool-Aid and maybe some bread and some cheese. Because I wasn't eating, I was drinking to survive. So January 13th, I cried out to this power that I didn't believe wanted anything to do with me, because I had tried to seek it through how my mother saw it. And so I cried out to this power, and I made a phone call. And again, this is the day that I was really touched by God's grace, and I believe that there are no mistakes. And I called my friend Bill, and I said to him, can't do this anymore. I can't live like this. I knew that I was dying, but I just didn't know how to not drink. You know, I had tried all the things in the big book. I'm going to walk past this bar on my way home today. I'm not going to go into this bar. And by the time it's 2:00 in the morning, I'm pounding on the bar again, drunk, and they're kicking me out, and I'm making a fool of myself. And so I called Bill, and I said, I can't do this anymore. And he says to me, it just so happens, and Bill's a hairdresser, it just so happens that in my chair, I have one of the directors of the Godenzia House, which is a recovery center in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. No mistakes. No mistakes. God doesn't need my knowledge or my permission to get me sober. And so he put her on the phone, and she asked me one of the hardest questions I had been asked in my life up to this point. She said, Jamie, can you be there in 2.5 hours? I can be there in 2.5 hours. And I had no idea. I didn't know. That was the hardest question I'd ever been asked. I didn't know if I could be there in 2.5 hours, because at the end of my drinking, I was drinking against my will. You know, booze was leading the show, if you will. I wasn't making decisions. Alcohol was making decisions for me. And again, God's grace kept me there for 2.5 hours, and they picked me up. I remember the little hallway that I was sitting in for my intake. There were two mismatched chairs. It was dark. There were patches in the walls. It was this little dingy staircase. And they got me into a rehab in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And they took me over to this rehab. And the guy that was driving the van, I was 37 years old at this point. The guy that was driving this van said to me, I was 37 when I got sober too, and I've been sober ever since. And hopefully that's a magical number for you. And I didn't care about any of that stuff. What I knew was that they were taking me to some place that I could be safe and protected. And so they took me into this place, and they locked the door behind me. And I thought, oh, thank God I'm safe from all those big bad things on the street. Because, see, I don't understand any of this. I had tried to stay sober. I had tried to stop doing the things I was doing. I had tried to be a brother, son, and I couldn't manage any of those things. And so they put me in this place and they let me sleep for 3 days and they woke me up to check my vitals and make sure I was still alive. And then they gave me some hope. They gave me a big book. They told me what I needed to do. They took me to meetings. They introduced me to you guys. And so I was in this place for 28 days and they were getting ready to release me and I was scared to death because if I knew if they put me out on the street by myself that I was dead, was absolutely dead. I know I couldn't rely on myself. And they said to me, Jamie, we're going to take you to York, Pennsylvania, and we're going to put you in a recovery house, sort of like a halfway house, except that that's the step down from where you go when you're in rehab. And so they took me to this recovery house, and there were about 12 guys in there. And I started to do what we do in AA. See, I'm in a recovery house, and they're telling me when I have to get up and when I have to leave the house and what I have to do when I'm out of the house and what chore I have to do and when I have to be home and when the lights go out. You know, they're basically running the show for me, which is what I needed. You know, I got to Alcoholics Anonymous and I was fried, man. Put a fork in me, I'm done. I didn't know that because I had never tried to get sober before. But I think that I had enough desperation that I just said the most spiritual words that I could muster is yes and okay. And so they were telling me what to do. And so these guys would go to meetings in the inner city in York, Pennsylvania, and I would go to these meetings with them. There was a clubhouse there on Beaver Street. And I was scared to death because I had never seen any of these people. I had been living as a shut-in for I can't tell you how long, aside from going out to get what I needed. And it was the inner city, and there was nobody in there that was like me. And I thought for sure they were going to kill me when I was walking down the street, you know. And so I like this meeting, though, because there's chaos there. And it's, you know, there's fighting, and I can recognize all of that. But then I start seeing these people who have something that I don't recognize. And they're quiet, and they're calm. And it looks like they have a light in their eyes. And so these people start talking to me because they see me and they know me. And they say to me one evening, hey, Jamie, we're going to this other meeting. It's a little further out of the city. And I said, why would you do that? There are meetings like 5 times a day here. You know, I have to tell you that the first time that I went to this inner city meeting, I believe that there are angels that God places in my life. I went to this inner city meeting and there was a guy there and he was dirty from head to toe. And he was homeless. And he reached out his hand and he said, welcome. Let me show you where the coffee is. I don't remember his name. I don't know what happened to him. He and I became friends. He was a homeless man who introduced me to the coffee in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe that that was one of the people that allowed me to stay here with you guys. And so I'm going to this meeting. These people asked me if I want to go to this other meeting. And I thought, again, you know, I don't really have any answers for you. All I do is say yes and okay. And so I said, yeah, sure, I'll go. And they said it's a speaker meeting. And I hadn't heard of that because, you know, I'm new in AA. So we go to this meeting and there's about 250 people in there. And this guy gets up to the podium and he doesn't look anything like me. He's a pilot. He comes from money. I come from the ghetto. But he starts talking and it's like, I used to tell my sponsor, and Steve is still my sponsor. I used to tell my sponsor it was like we were in a romantic comedy and he and I were the only 2 people in the room, in a room full of 250 people, because he started sharing his story and he was telling my story and he was talking right to me. It was like I was the only person in there. We like to call that the language of the heart. What happens is it's the truth for me. And for the first time in my life, somebody knows who I am. And they're talking to me about me. And the jig is up, you know, basically. And so I go up to this guy because the people that I went there with told me that you thank the speaker after the meeting. And so I go up to thank the speaker and I say, hey, Steve, I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story. And will you be my sponsor? And again, God doesn't need my knowledge or my permission to get me what I need. I just need to show up with some willingness, which I didn't even know that I had. And I was like, what the hell did I just do? Like, that was not my plan. And Steve immediately said, I would be honored to be your sponsor. That's how I was rendered, speechless. See, because I get to Alcoholics Anonymous and I know what shoes you're all wearing. because I come to you full of guilt and disgust and shame, and I am absolutely sure that I am the worst person on the planet for the things that I've done to get what I need. And so I'm looking at your feet. I don't even know you have heads because that's where your eyes are, and I can't look in your eyes. And so Steve said to me, I would be honored to be your sponsor. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And I was floored. Nobody had been honored. I don't even know if I had ever heard that word before he said it to me. And he put his hand out and he said, I'm going to give you some directions. Nobody had wanted to spend any time with me that I knew until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And then this guy is getting ready to lay his life down and give me a portion of his time. My own family had told me to never come back again. They did the greatest thing that they could do for me. They did something that is called self-preservation. I was angry at them at first, but I understand it today. There comes a point in the life of an active alcoholic when the family has to protect themselves. And when they do, it's the greatest gift that you could ever receive. So this guy says to me, this guy, Steve Farnsworth from Baltimore, and these people, I had seen them. Those were the people that I was seeing, that were peaceful, that thing that I couldn't recognize, and that had the light in their eyes. And they laughed, and it annoyed me because I couldn't see anything to laugh about. I'm living in a recovery house, and my family has told me never to come back again, And so this guy says to me, I'm going to give you some directions. I'm going to have you read the doctor's opinion, and I'm going to come up tomorrow night. We're going to go through the first 3 steps. He said, I will show up at your house at 7 o'clock. If you're not outside by 7:10, my car will leave whether you're in it or not. And so, again, I was touched by God's grace. So I read the doctor's opinion, and I call him, and I tell him I read it. And he says, I want you to read it again. And so I read the doctor's opinion, and I call him, and I tell him that I read it. And he says, I want you to read it one last time. And I don't know why. I have no idea. But I'm just doing it, because that's what he told me to do. And so Steve comes up and he picks me up. And Steve lives in Alexandria, Virginia, I believe, or somewhere down in that area. He's in the Baltimore groups. So he drives about 2 hours to York, Pennsylvania to work with a drunk like me, a low-bottom drunk like me. And so he tells me about the history of Alcoholics Anonymous and the Washingtonians and the Oxford groups, and Roland Hazard and Ebby Thatcher, and Ebby carrying the message to Bill, and Bill carrying the message to Bob in Henrietta Seiberman's carriage house. And that gets me. I don't know why, but I think for the first time in my life, I feel a part of something that is huge. And so then we start talking about the first 3 steps. And as far as unmanageability goes, I'm living in a recovery house where they're telling me when to get up and when to leave the house and when to come home and when I have to do my chore and when I have to go to bed and when the lights are out and how many meetings I have to go to. My family has just run me out of their lives. This family is very, very close, Italian Catholic family. Unmanageability is reigning clear for me, and then we talk about powerlessness. Those days when I used to walk home from work and say, I am absolutely not drinking today. And I'd walk past my favorite door and I was right, or walk past my favorite bar and I was right in that door, back at the races, So we talked about that first step. He said to me, Jamie, this first step is the only one that you can do 100%. And it's between you and God. It's got nothing to do with me. I'm just here to show you where the directions are in this book. And this book is also there to protect you from me because I'm alcoholic, buddy. And so, he gave me a couple of decisions to go home with. We talked about the second step. And we started to address God. And that was going to be a problem for me. Because I know what I've done in the alleys and to my mother, what I've given away to get this elixir of life. It's funny that we call it, alcohol is called spirits because I had found my spiritual program on the streets and it was killing me. So we talked about the second step, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And he said, Jamie, I just want to ask you a question. You came up to me and you asked me to be your sponsor without your knowledge or permission. At least that's what you said to me. You've recognized something in me that you want. I'm just going to ask you if you believe that there's something that I believe in that's working for me. And I couldn't deny that. It's like the language that he was talking to me in that meeting. Talk directly to me, And I said, yes, Steve, There is no doubt in my mind that there's something that works for you. But I'm too bad for God. He doesn't want anything to do with me. He said, I'm just going to ask you to open up your mind the size of a mustard seed and continue to do this program with me. Hold my hand as we walk this path. And I guarantee you that this power will come in infinite measures and prove itself to you. And I'm here to tell you, today I think I'm God's favorite because of the gifts that I've been giving Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a sponsee sister, her name's Patty. All of these people I know wouldn't mind me saying their names because this is what we do. Patty and I argue about who's God's favorite. She thinks that it's her, and I let her think that sometimes, but I really know that it's me. Because see, what happened was God led me to this guy named Steve Farnsworth. Steve calls me Jamie Filippelli on the rocks. He led me to this guy, Steve Farnsworth, and Steve Farnsworth showed me where the program is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he shared his experience with me freely for fun. We do this thing lightly. There are some serious things that we need to talk about, but we do it for free and for fun because if we don't do that, it's not attractive to anybody. And so I get serious with my guys and girls that I work with, but we also bring it back to the program. Light. So we talk about the third step, and Steve and I get out of his truck in the same parking lot of the place where I had met him the night before, and we get on our knees and hold hands and say the third step prayer. Now, of course, I got nothing going on, right? I'm living in a recovery house. I probably have one set of clothing that I've been wearing for 2 months. And I'm looking around to make sure that nobody can see me praying with this guy in the parking lot holding hands. Old ideas. See, I come to you guys with a bunch of old ideas that I think are still going to work for me. Luckily, again, God has given me the gift of desperation. There is this intersection that is the place that I need to be to get what you guys have. It's when I have absolute desperation, when I have nothing left to defend, and somebody crosses my path that has a real solution in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what was going on with Steve and I that first day. The power of one alcoholic working with another alcoholic. A lot of times what happens is guys listen to the words. And what happens when we listen to the words, we miss the music. And if you can't hear the music, you can't dance. And the dance is where the magic happens. The action. And Steve taught me that from day one. So we did that third step prayer in the parking lot. And then he said to me, in my big book, it says that we thought well before taking this step. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go home and I'd like for you to get with whatever this power is that we're feeling here today. And I would like for you to make some decisions. Because see, Jamie, you don't have to prove to me that you are alcoholic. If you say you're alcoholic and you want my help, I'm here, dude. I am all in. You have every bit of me. That first step is 100% for you, between you and God. So I start to believe in this power because I see what it's doing. And then Steve, after I call him and I tell him that I've made the decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of this power, whatever it is, he gives me directions for a fourth step. And I had enough pain that I sat in a room in an apartment. I was living in an apartment at this point, out of the recovery house. And I sit in a room and I invite God into the equation because I don't know what's going on here, but I know that this guy has given me some directions, and I invite God into my pen. And Steve said, work down the left side of the pages on these lists, because believe me, when you go back and you see your mother's name, you're going to remember why you're resentful at her. Those things haven't gone away all this time. I'm sure they're still going to be there. So Steve gave me directions, and I ran through that fourth step in one night. Again, God doesn't need my knowledge or my permission to get me sober. And apparently I had a job to do here, so he needed to clean me up. And so we got together and we did the fifth step in that same parking lot. That's our spot where our romantic comedy began. So we're sitting in his truck in that parking lot where I first met him, where I heard the message of hope. And we do a fifth step, and he says to me, so Jamie, what's the one thing that you never want to tell anybody in your life? And I was floored. That wasn't on my paper, dude. And he shared that thing of his that he was never going to tell his sponsor. which made it easy for me to tell him that one thing that wouldn't let me look you guys in the eyes. And so I got that first thing out, that biggest fear. I walked through it with my sponsor holding my hand. He made it okay. And so the rest of that fifth step just flew out of my face. My sponsor and I pray before we do anything and together in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what I do with my guys too, because I know that God knows and that I don't. See, God has all power and all knowledge, which means that I got 0 and 0. So I invite God into the equation with everything that I do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I did it at the beginning of this meeting. I did it this morning because I knew I was coming to this meeting, that he wanted me to talk about some stuff. I don't know what he has me saying. I just show up and say, use me, please. I wake up in the morning and I say, God, here are my hands. Please show me what it is that you need me to do with these for your kids. And show me how to do it, because I'm a dummy, and I'll get lost. These principles that we practice in Alcoholics Anonymous, my sponsor likes to call them guardrails. They just kind of allow us to bump against them as we stay on this path, and they keep us on this path. Steve and I did that fifth step in his truck, and at the end of it, a breeze blew through the truck. It was a hot, steamy day. A breeze blew through the truck, and I knew what that breeze was. Steve looked at me and he said, I want to tell you that I want to thank you for allowing me to be the one that you shared that stuff with. That's a big deal. And I want you to know that all of those things that you wrote on those papers, they don't make you the man that you are. Those are just things that you did to survive in the world until you could get to us. And I'm honored that you've allowed me to know these things. And so then he said to me, I want you to go home and I want you to put your book up on a shelf if it's not, because we take our book down from the shelf and we do an hour. That's all I'm going to talk about in the steps, because, I have a sponsor, and I'm assuming that most of you have a sponsor. And I'm not here to take you through the steps. Those were just profound experiences for me. After that fifth step, I knew the presence of God. And that's when I began to establish a relationship with his presence. My sponsor we'd be in a meeting. We would drive all over the place to a meeting. We'd go 2.5 hours away on a Tuesday night to a meeting. And I'm like, why are we driving 2.5 hours away? There are meetings all over this town. And he'd say, because Jamie, there's a speaker there that I know has a message of hope. And that's what I want. I need that every day. It's a message of hope. And so, again, he would say, my car will be out front of your house at 7. It's leaving at 7:05, whether you're in it or not. If you want this thing, you'll go for it. He said, you can either do these things or you can drink and die, basically. And I get that. Absolutely true. I get to work with a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And they remind me every day. I talked to a guy yesterday who had been sober for a while when I first got sober. And I think he might have 6 years now. He would have had 15. That doesn't matter. And he said to me, Jamie, I'm married and my wife is cheating on me and I'm going to a strip club and, I'm getting spanked and, doing all these things that go against what I believe in my soul. And he said, I'm in a restaurant and the waitress says to me, hey, you want a beer? And I say, yeah. He said, I didn't even think about it. I had no mental defense. He said, so I had 2 beers. And then I thought to myself, oh my God, I just had 2 beers. I must not be alcoholic. And I totally get this. I haven't done this. I've been sober since the day I got here. But this is just me knowing who I am still and the gifts that God gives me that allows me to think that I'm God's favorite. And he says to me, so I have 2 beers and I decide that I'm not an alcoholic. And so what I do with that is I go out and I celebrate not being an alcoholic and get absolutely shit-faced. And I'm like, dude, I totally get that. That's not my experience, but I hear you and I feel you, And so I'm reminded every day of the man that I was when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. What I know is that God grabbed my hand without my knowledge or my permission. He brought me to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. He put my hand in the hand of Stephen G. Farnsworth, my sponsor, the greatest sponsor on the planet, the most peaceful guy I know. Introduced me to people like his sponsor, Tom Flynn, who's no longer with us, but he carried the message to me as well in his car, looking at me in the back seat while he's driving. I'm like, Tom, we're going to die. He's sharing spiritual principles with me. So God puts my hand in these people's hands, and they show me how to live in Alcoholics Anonymous. And Steve takes me through the steps, and we're in a meeting, and I see a guy standing by the door, and my friend Chris. I've heard this Sam Shoemaker. I don't know if I'd call it a story, but it's called I Stand by the Door. I don't know if you've read it. If you haven't, I'd find it because it's powerful. So I see this guy standing by the door, and he's kicking sand, and he doesn't look like he wants to be here. And I'm maybe 3 months sober, and my sponsor says, go over there and talk to that guy, tell him what you found. And I said, Steve, I don't have anything to give him. I got nothing for him. And he says, that's okay, because he doesn't know that. And God knows what you need to bring to him. And he's going to hear you quicker than he's going to hear me, a guy with 20 years sober. Go over there and put your hand out, because that's what we do. You said that in the beginning of this, you were willing to go to any lengths to achieve and maintain joyful sobriety. Were you lying then, or are you lying now? So I go over there and I talk to this guy, and he doesn't stay. But my sponsor gets me to do that on a regular basis, and what happens is I get to start taking people through the steps. And I'm going to tell you what. One of the greatest gifts that I have been given in sobriety is seeing a guy who has come to Alcoholics Anonymous from the streets, living on the railroad tracks, survived delirium tremens where he saw snakes flying out of the tracks into his skin. And I'm sitting across from him in a fifth step, and I get to see the lights go on. And he says to me, oh my God, I get it. That's a miracle. God gives me miracles every single day that I'm willing to be in the middle of this thing. I'm going to tell you about a couple of amends that I made. So my family ran me off because they had to. And I start making amends fairly early in my sobriety, and my sponsor tells me, here's what you're going to do. You're going to call them up and you're going to ask them for some of their time because you've been stealing it long enough. And when they say that you can have some time, you show up on time or early, even better. And then what you do is you thank them for allowing you to have that time. And you tell them that you're doing this program. It's called Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's one of these steps in this program. And they promise me if I do these steps that I might be able to stay sober if God wills it. And one of those steps is that I come to you and I tell you how I've wronged you. And I don't say I'm sorry. I've been saying I'm sorry my entire life. Nobody believes that shit anymore. Excuse my language. You don't say you're sorry. You say I was wrong. And these are the things that I believe that I've done that were wrong. And then you shut up and you allow them to tell you the things that they think that you've done wrong. And you sit there and you listen. And then you ask them how you can make it right. And then you show up and you do those things, living amends with people. And so what happened was I went to my sister Suzanne and I did my shtick, my ninth step shtick. And she slaps me across the face. And I'm like, whoa, this is not how it's supposed to go. And she said to me, and this is extremely powerful for me, she leaned into me and she said, I need to tell you that she was the one that told me to go away or she would have me arrested. She said, you're my baby brother, and I love you with every fiber of my being. And I need to tell you that the day that I told you to leave was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. That's how I affect the people in my life when I'm in active alcoholism, and I don't even know it. And I stay there and I listen to that. And then I make amends to her, however she says that I should. I have an amazing relationship with my entire family today. My mother was put into assisted living because of the actions that I took when I was caring for her. We couldn't take care of her anymore. I couldn't take care of her. I was gone, getting well. They couldn't take care of her anymore, and they put her into assisted living. And so I had to make amends to her. And so I had to ask my sisters if I was allowed to go there. And so I go there and I sit with her and I do the same deal with her. And she's getting ready, she's on the way out. She's leaving us right before our eyes. And she says to me, I love you, and all I've ever wanted for you was for you to be happy. And I never really knew what was wrong or what I had done wrong. And I went back to my sponsor, and I said, Steve, I don't feel that I've made a full amend to her. I don't think that she gets it because she's disappearing with Alzheimer's. And he said, okay, well, you're going to make a living amends. You're going to call your sisters every time that you want to go there, every time that you're available to go there, and you're going to do what they tell you to do. And my mom was afraid of men because of something in her past. I don't know what that was, but she was afraid of men. She would be sitting in this assisted living facility, and she would walk around the perimeter of this facility. And so I would go there, and I would say to her, after I watched her walk by me about 3 or 4 times, I would go up and I would say, Anne, can I walk with you today? And sometimes she would say yes, and sometimes she would say no. And I showed up anyway because of you guys. Oh, man. See, God cleans me up and dusts me off, and he makes me usefully whole. And I get to clean up those things. I really have a chance to clean up those things. And what happens is I get to be at the funeral, my mother's funeral, because she left. And I get to be there for my family. And they get to lean on my shoulder. And I get to be their strength. I wasn't prepared for this. See, I come to Alcoholics Anonymous to you guys. And there's something here for me. And I'm broken and I'm busted. And you guys fix me. And you show me how to walk. And you show me how to look in your eyes. And show me how to be honest and be a man of integrity. Be a brother and a son and a friend. And I get to think that I'm God's favorite. That power that I thought wanted nothing to do with me when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's a joke. And I know that's a joke. I know that I'm one of God's kids, just like everybody else in that 5th step. My sponsor said to me, Jamie, God wants absolutely everything for you, just like he wants for all of his kids. You are one of his kids, and he wants the best for you. And so I want you to get it. I want your dreams to come true here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And my dreams have come true. I've done crazy things in Alcoholics Anonymous and in my life because of Alcoholics Anonymous that don't make sense. But see, here's the deal. They don't need to make sense. If I try to make sense of what God's world is, he's not big enough for me or for you, for the world. What happens is I come to you guys. God puts my hand in the hand of this guy named Steve. He introduces me to all these other people that are doing this deal. And I follow these people. And then he puts people in front of me, and he puts their hand in mine. And I share those gifts from that 5th step, those things that I thought were disgusting. I'm uniquely qualified to help those people that no one else can help. And what happens is I get a brand new life from Alcoholics Anonymous and God. I don't get a patched up, old, beat up life. You get a brand new life. And you get to see miracles on a daily basis and show up here for you. And I get to do this. I don't know who needs to hear me today, but I know that somebody did because God brought me here to do it. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I am here to ensure that Alcoholics Anonymous stays exactly like it was when I got here. Because Alcoholics Anonymous didn't need me when I got here, and it won't need me when I leave. But when I leave, I want to make sure it's exactly the same, so that when my little nephew needs to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, my niece can say, my Uncle Jamie was an amazing example of what goes on there, and I'm going to take my son there. That's my responsibility. I recommend finding the Sam Shoemaker, I Stand by the Door reading. It's incredibly profound for anybody who's doing AA. These principles are principles that apply to everything all the time. I don't have to believe them. I just have to do them. There's a chapter in our book that's called Into Action. There's no chapter in our book called Into Talking. And I talk to a lot of people about a lot of stuff, but what I do more than that is I take actions that are shown to me on a daily basis by many people in Alcoholics Anonymous who have what I want. I still want what these people have. I am a married man today, never had that plan. I have a husband who in 12 years I have never fought with. We've never said an unkind word to each other because that's what God wants from me. I don't know how that happens. I'm a jealous, vindictive, malicious dude when I get to him. And I have this beautiful human being in my life, another gift. There are miracles that I could talk to you about for hours in Alcoholics Anonymous that I got from coming to you guys without my knowledge or my permission. But I'm going to end it right there. I think I've shared enough. Glenn, thank you so much for asking me to share my story. I love you guys, and I'll see you around on this road that we trudge to happy destiny.